Amelia Jenkins stood in front of the towering iron gates of a grand mansion perched on a hilltop, its golden lights spilling out from the tall windows. Her hands clenched tightly, as if trying to steady herself against the realization that her life was about to change forever. She never imagined she would marry a man she barely knew, let alone someone as enigmatic and powerful as Malcolm Pierce, a tech billionaire. But with her father drowning in insurmountable debt, she had no other choice. "Is this the biggest mistake of my life?" Amelia wondered as the gates slowly creaked open, ushering her into a world she had never known. Amelia Jenkins was a 27-year-old interior designer with a sharp eye for detail and a heart full of determination. She had spent years building her career, but her life took a sharp turn when her father, Peter Jenkins, fell into financial ruin. Once a respected teacher, Peter had made a series of poor investments in an attempt to secure a better future for his family. Instead, he found himself drowning in debt, with creditors threatening to take everything they owned. Amelia had always been her father's rock, the one who stepped up when things got tough. But this time, the weight of the situation was too much for her to bear alone. She had exhausted every option: loans, extra work, even selling off her prized possessions. Nothing was enough. Enter Malcolm Pierce. Malcolm was a 33-year-old tech billionaire, a self-made man who had built his empire from the ground up. Known for his brilliance and cold demeanor, he was a man who trusted no one. Rumors swirled about his health. Some said he was paralyzed from the waist down due to a mysterious accident, while others speculated it was a ruse to keep his enemies at bay. Malcolm's life was far from simple. As the CEO of Pierce Innovations, a leading tech company, he was constantly under scrutiny. But his biggest challenge wasn't the competition. It was Gregory Monroe, a major shareholder in the company. Gregory had been circling like a vulture, waiting for Malcolm to show any sign of weakness. And Malcolm's biggest vulnerability? A clause in his company's charter that required him to be married by the age of 35 to maintain full control of the board. The two met at a charity gala, an event Amelia had reluctantly attended in a desperate attempt to find help for her father. Malcolm, intrigued by her straightforwardness and resilience, saw an opportunity. "You need money," he said bluntly, "and I need a wife. Let's make a deal." Amelia was stunned. The idea of marrying a stranger, especially someone as intimidating as Malcolm, was unthinkable, but as the days passed and her father's situation worsened, she realized she had no other choice. The stage was set, a marriage of convenience between two people from completely different worlds, one driven by duty, the other by necessity. Amelia sat in her small, cluttered apartment, staring at the stack of overdue bills on the table. The phone rang incessantly, creditors demanding payments she couldn't make. Her father, Peter, had grown quieter with each passing day, the weight of his failures crushing his once lively spirit. She had tried everything: extra shifts, selling her designs at a discount, even pawning her mother's old jewelry. But it wasn't enough. The debt was too large and time was running out. The charity gala had been her last-ditch effort. She had no intention of mingling with the city's elite, but she hoped to find someone, anyone, willing to help her father. Instead, she found Malcolm Pierce. Their first meeting had been brief but unforgettable. Malcolm had watched her from across the room, his sharp eyes studying her every move. When she finally approached him, her voice steady despite the desperation in her heart, she explained her situation. "I'm not asking for charity," she said firmly. "I'm asking for a chance to save my father." Malcolm's lips curled into a faint, unreadable smile. "You're bold. I like that." A few days later, Amelia received an unexpected invitation to meet Malcolm at his office. She arrived, nervous but determined, and was greeted by the man himself, seated in his sleek wheelchair behind a massive glass desk. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his tone as cold and calculated as the man himself. "Marry me. I'll pay off your father's debts, and in return, you'll play the role of my wife until I secure my position at Pierce Innovations." Amelia froze. The offer was outrageous, unthinkable, but as Malcolm laid out the terms, strictly business, no emotional entanglements, she realized it might be her only way out. "I'll give you time to think," Malcolm said, his voice softening slightly. "But don't take too long. My offer won't last forever." Amelia left his office with her mind racing. Could she really do this? Could she marry a man she barely knew, a man who seemed as cold as the steel walls of his office? But when she returned home to find her father coughing violently, his health deteriorating under the stress, she knew her answer. The wedding was a quiet, almost clinical affair. No flowers, no guests, no vows of love. Just a simple exchange of signatures at the courthouse. Amelia wore a modest white dress, her face calm but her heart heavy. Malcolm, in his tailored suit, looked every bit the powerful billionaire, though his expression remained unreadable. As they left the courthouse, Malcolm turned to her. "Welcome to your new life," he said, his tone devoid of warmth. Amelia moved into Malcolm's sprawling mansion the next day. The house was breathtaking modern, sleek, and filled with the latest technology, but it felt cold, almost lifeless, much like the man who owned it. The staff greeted her politely but kept their distance, clearly instructed not to interfere. Malcolm had laid out the rules clearly. 1. They would maintain separate bedrooms. 2. She was free to decorate and live as she pleased, but she was not to interfere with his work or personal matters. 3. Public appearances were mandatory. She was to play the role of the devoted wife whenever required. At first, Amelia tried to adjust. She spent her days exploring the mansion, working on her interior design projects, and calling her father to check on his health. But the loneliness was suffocating. Malcolm was rarely home, and when he was, he buried himself in his office or retreated to his private quarters. Despite his cold demeanor, there were moments when Malcolm's humanity peeked through. One evening, Amelia found him in the library, staring at an old photograph of a woman. When she asked about it, he quickly hid the picture and changed the subject. Another time, she noticed him struggling to reach a book on a high shelf. Without thinking, she grabbed it for him. "I don't need your help," he snapped, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Amelia couldn't help but wonder, was this the real Malcolm Pierce? A man hiding behind walls of steel and ice, afraid to let anyone in? But just as she began to feel a sliver of sympathy for him, the rumors started. The tabloids painted her as a gold digger, a woman who had married Malcolm for his money. Strangers whispered behind her back at events, and even the staff began to look at her differently. Amelia tried to ignore it, but the weight of the judgment was crushing. And Malcolm? He did nothing to defend her. "You knew what you were signing up for," he said one night, his voice cold as ever. "This is the price of the deal." Amelia stared at him, her chest tightening. "And what about you? What's the price you're paying?" Malcolm didn't answer. He simply wheeled himself out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence of their transactional marriage. The days turned into weeks, and the tension between Amelia and Malcolm only grew. Their marriage was nothing more than a business arrangement, but the cracks in their carefully constructed facade were beginning to show. Amelia had done her best to keep her distance, focusing on her work and her father's recovery. But the loneliness in the mansion was unbearable. The staff avoided her, the tabloids continued to attack her, and Malcolm remained as cold and distant as ever. One evening, after a particularly grueling charity event where whispers about her gold-digging motives had been louder than usual, Amelia confronted Malcolm. "Do you even care what people are saying about me?" she demanded, her voice trembling with frustration. "They think I'm some kind of parasite, and you just sit there and let them." Malcolm looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable. "What people think doesn't matter," he said flatly. "You knew this would happen when you agreed to the deal." Amelia's chest tightened. "Maybe it doesn't matter to you, but it does to me. I'm not some pawn in your game, Malcolm. I'm a person." For a moment, Malcolm's icy exterior seemed to crack. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then closed it again. Instead, he wheeled himself out of the room, leaving Amelia standing there, her emotions swirling. But the real breaking point came a few nights later. Amelia couldn't sleep and decided to take a walk through the mansion. As she passed Malcolm's office, she noticed the door slightly ajar. Inside, she saw something that made her heart stop. Malcolm standing, fully upright, reaching for a file on a high shelf. Her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't paralyzed. Amelia backed away, her mind racing. Why would he lie about something like this? What else was he hiding? The next morning, she confronted him. "You can walk," she said, her voice shaking. "You've been lying to me this whole time." Malcolm's face darkened. "It's not what you think," he said, his tone defensive. "Then explain it to me," Amelia shot back. "Because right now, I don't know who you are or what I've gotten myself into." But Malcolm didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, leaving Amelia with more questions than ever before. Amelia couldn't shake the image of Malcolm standing in his office. The lie he had been living gnawed at her, and the trust, fragile as it was between them, began to crumble. She avoided him for days, retreating to her room or spending hours walking the grounds of the mansion. But the questions in her mind wouldn't stop. Why would he fake being paralyzed? What was he hiding? Meanwhile, the outside world was closing in. Gregory Munro, the cunning and ambitious shareholder of Pierce Innovations, had been watching Malcolm closely. He had always suspected that Malcolm's supposed disability was a ploy, and now he had the evidence he needed. A private investigator hired by Gregory had captured photos of Malcolm standing late at night in his office. Gregory wasted no time. He leaked the photos to the press, along with a scathing statement accusing Malcolm of deceiving the public, the board, and the shareholders. The media frenzy was immediate and brutal. Headlines screamed about Malcolm's web of lies, and reporters camped outside the mansion, demanding answers. Amelia found herself caught in the crossfire. The tabloids painted her as a co-conspirator, a woman who had married Malcolm to help him maintain his charade. Strangers hurled insults at her online, and even her father called, worried about the backlash. "Amelia, what's going on?" Peter asked, his voice fraught with concern. "Are you okay?" "I don't know, Dad," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Inside the mansion, the tension between Amelia and Malcolm reached a boiling point. She confronted him again, this time with the photos plastered across every news outlet. "Well, didn't you tell me the truth?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to me, to us?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "I didn't tell you because I couldn't risk it," he said, his voice low but firm. "Gregory has been trying to destroy me for years. If he knew I wasn't paralyzed, he would have used it against me sooner. This was the only way to protect myself and the company." Amelia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't trust anyone, do you? Not even me?" Malcolm's expression softened for a moment, but then the walls went back up. "Trust is a luxury I can't afford," he said. The situation spiraled further when Gregory called for an emergency board meeting, demanding Malcolm's resignation. He accused Malcolm of fraud and claimed that his deception had damaged the company's reputation. Amelia, despite her anger and hurt, found herself standing by Malcolm's side. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was loyalty, or maybe it was the flicker of something deeper she had started to feel for him. At the board meeting, Gregory presented his evidence, including the photos and testimonies from staff who had seen Malcolm walking. The room was tense, the board members whispering among themselves. But Malcolm wasn't going down without a fight. He stood, literally, and addressed the room. "Yes, I can walk," he admitted. "And yes, I hid it. But I did it to protect this company from people like Gregory Munro, who would stop at nothing to tear it apart for their own gain." He then presented his own evidence, documents proving that Gregory had been embezzling funds from the company for years. The room erupted in shock as Malcolm's team handed out copies of the files. Gregory's face turned pale. "This is a lie," he shouted, but the evidence was undeniable. The board voted unanimously to remove Gregory from his position, and Malcolm retained control of the company, but the victory felt hollow. As they left the meeting, Amelia turned to Malcolm. "You may have won today, but you've lost something much more important," she said quietly. Malcolm looked at her, his expression unreadable. "And what's that?" "Me," she replied, walking away before he could respond. The mansion was eerily quiet that night. Amelia sat in her room, staring out the window at the city lights below. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the board meeting, Gregory's downfall, and Malcolm's cold, calculated defense. He had won, but at what cost? She felt exhausted, emotionally drained. The man she had married was a stranger, someone who hid behind walls of lies and manipulation. And yet, there was a part of her that couldn't walk away. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. It was Malcolm. He stood in the doorway, no longer in his wheelchair, his tall frame silhouetted by the dim hallway light. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Amelia hesitated but nodded. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unresolved tension. "I know I've hurt you," Malcolm began, his tone uncharacteristically vulnerable. "And I know I've made mistakes. But everything I've done, every decision I've made was to protect what I've built. I didn't think I could trust anyone, not after everything I've been through." Amelia crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "And what about me? Did you ever think about how your lies would affect me? I've been dragged through the mud, called a gold digger, a fraud, and you just stood there and let it happen?" Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You're right. I should have defended you. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But I was afraid that if I let you in, you'd see the real me and walk away." Amelia's heart ached at his words, but she refused to let herself soften. "You don't get to use fear as an excuse, Malcolm. Trust isn't something you can demand, it's something you earn." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I want to earn it, Amelia. I don't want this to just be a deal anymore. I want it to be real." Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she saw the man behind the mask, the man who had been hurt, betrayed, and left to fend for himself in a world that demanded perfection. But before she could respond, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the mansion. Both of them turned toward the noise, their conversation forgotten. Malcolm's phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen. His face darkened. "It's Gregory," he said grimly. "He's not done yet." "Unless—" Amelia followed Malcolm as he rushed downstairs. In the living room, the large glass window overlooking the garden had been smashed. A brick lay on the floor, wrapped in a piece of paper. Malcolm picked it up and unfolded the note. "You may have won the board, but this isn't over. Watch your back." Amelia's stomach churned. What does he want now? Malcolm's expression was hard, his jaw clenched. Revenge. And he'll stop at nothing to get it. The threat hung in the air, a reminder that their battle was far from over. But for the first time, Malcolm didn't push Amelia away. Instead, he turned to her, his voice steady. "I can't do this alone," he said. "I need you, Amelia. Not just for the company, but for me." Amelia looked at him, her emotions warring within her. She had every reason to walk away, to leave this mess behind. But something in Malcolm's eyes, something raw and real, made her pause. "Prove it," she said quietly. "Prove that I can trust you." Malcolm nodded, determination flickering in his gaze. "I will." The days following Gregory's threat were tense. Security around the mansion was tightened, and Malcolm worked tirelessly to ensure the company was protected from any further sabotage. But amidst the chaos, something began to shift between him and Amelia. For the first time, Malcolm started letting Amelia into his world. He shared stories about his childhood, his struggles to build the company, and the betrayals that had shaped him into the guarded man he was today. Amelia listened, her walls slowly coming down as she began to see the man behind the armor. One evening, as they sat in the garden under the soft glow of the mansion's lights, Malcolm turned to her. "I've spent my whole life fighting to prove myself," he admitted. "But for the first time, I'm realizing that none of it matters if I don't have someone to share it with." Amelia's heart ached at his words. She had seen glimpses of this vulnerability before, but now it was laid bare. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," she said softly. "But if this is going to work, you have to let me in. No more lies, no more secrets." Malcolm nodded, his gaze steady. "No more lies," he promised. Their relationship began to change. Malcolm made an effort to defend Amelia publicly, issuing a statement to the press that not only cleared her name, but also admitted to his own mistakes. "My wife has been unfairly judged because of my actions," he said during a press conference. "She has stood by me through everything, and I owe her, and all of you, the truth." The media frenzy slowly died down, and for the first time, Amelia felt like she could breathe again. But Gregory wasn't done. One final attempt to sabotage Malcolm came in the form of a leaked document that falsely implicated him in illegal business practices. The board was furious, and the company's stock plummeted overnight. Amelia, however, refused to let Malcolm face this alone. She used her connections and skills to help uncover the truth, working alongside Malcolm's legal team to prove his innocence. Together, they discovered that Gregory had forged the documents in a desperate bid to destroy Malcolm once and for all. The evidence was irrefutable, and Gregory was arrested for fraud and embezzlement. The company's reputation was restored, and Malcolm emerged stronger than ever. But the real victory wasn't in the boardroom. It was in the quiet moments between Malcolm and Amelia. One night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Malcolm took her hand. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you came into my life," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've shown me that there's more to life than power and control. You've shown me what it means to love." Amelia smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "And you've shown me that even the most guarded hearts can change," she replied. Their kiss under the stars was a promise, a new beginning for both of them. The marriage that had started as a cold, calculated deal had transformed into something neither of them had expected: love. And that's how a marriage of convenience turned into a love story neither of them saw coming. What do you think about their journey? Would you have stayed and fought like Amelia, or walked away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.